Hi there, this is Jen Grice from jengrice.com. I am a Christian divorce mentor and boundary coach. I help women to reclaim their life and learn boundaries after divorce. So today I'm going to be talking about are boundaries biblical? This is a question I think that a lot of people misunderstand the answer and maybe even not understand what boundaries are in the first place to know if they would be biblical or not. So a boundary is a limit you place on yourself. It's not something to control somebody else. It is words first, action second. And you can only control your words and you can only control your actions. So if that's the case of a boundary, then you're looking at what you can and cannot control in your own life. Boundaries are also fences with gates around yourself to protect yourself from harm from toxic people or people who just want to push your boundaries. And if boundaries are fences with gates, you need to understand that you are the gatekeeper of that fence. So you get to decide what and who comes in and out of your life. So as you're deciding on these boundaries and these limits, you get to decide what keeps your peace and what doesn't. Everybody has their own limits, and some things bother some people and don't bother other people. So if your limit is, I can't stand 5 minutes of screaming, beyond 5 minutes, I'm done, I don't want to listen anymore, then that's your limit. Somebody else, like myself, can't stand a second of screaming and yelling, and that just disturbs my peace. And so that's my limit. Now, that's not to say that I can control somebody else who's screaming, but I can control if I'm around somebody who's screaming. I can walk away, can leave the environment, or if it's my own home, I can ask them to leave. And if they don't, I can call the police and have them escorted out of my house. So that's a boundary or limit. And we get to decide what we're willing to tolerate and what we're not, what we can put up with and what we can't, and what hurts us and what doesn't. This is common. I hear from the ladies that I mentor and coach is that they'll say, well, this really bothers me, but it doesn't bother somebody else, so it's not that big of a deal. And I say, it really doesn't matter how something affects somebody else. What matters is how it affects you. If something hurts you, then that's your limit. And something that may not hurt somebody else may hurt you. So someone's feelings might be hurt easier than somebody else's feelings. And that's okay. We all have different limits and different pain levels. And we have different levels of how much we'll tolerate and what we won't. Or what hurts us and what doesn't. So back to the question that I started this whole thing, is are boundaries biblical? So I want to take us back to the beginning of the human race. And Adam and Eve were in the garden, and they were given limits. They were told what was their responsibility and what was not their responsibility. And that comes in boundaries as well. We each have our own burdens to bear. And yes, the Bible talks about bearing each other's burdens, and we should, but that doesn't mean that we take the load off somebody else's back. So boundaries is also, I didn't say this earlier, but boundaries is also knowing what is your responsibility and knowing what is somebody else's responsibility. So if I'm living with another adult, their responsibility is to be an adult just as much as I'm being an adult. We each have our own burdens and responsibilities, and I'm not responsible for somebody else's feelings or anger or whatever it is they have to deal with. That's not my responsibility. Can I help carry some of the load for them, or vice versa, they carry some of the load for me, or we work as a team, living in the house together and doing things to contribute to the load? Yes. But that doesn't mean that I constantly take the whole load and say, well, I'm carrying this person's burden. But I'm talking normal, healthy people who, even if they're sick for a short period of time or they have some kind of disorder that puts them down, their job is still to be getting better and so that they can contribute and carry their own load. So back to the garden, God said, Adam, this is your responsibility, and Eve, this is your responsibility, and you need to work on these tasks that I've given you. But I've also set a limit. I've said you can stay in this garden as long as you don't eat from that tree over there. And everything would have been and was good for them until they pushed past God's boundary and said, we do not respect God, we're not going to listen to God, and we're going to do what we want to do and eat from that tree. Well, you know what happened if you read the Genesis story is that they were told to leave. God didn't say, oh, well, I'll give you another chance. I'm supposed to forgive and forget, and I should just blanketly give you another chance and just pretend that didn't happen. No, God said, out. Get out, and he put an angel with fire and didn't let him back in. That's it. You blew it. You messed up. It's done. And I believe this has to be the case sometimes in marriage where something, adultery is that thing. Jesus said that's it. You're done. No other chances. You committed adultery, done. Marriage over. So if you have that out, take it, I've said before, unless somebody is really working on themselves, then there's no proof that they're going to change. And even if they are working on themselves, the consequence may be divorce. You may get divorced and then find out down the road that maybe you can reconcile the marriage. But things that have happened, like adultery, there's just no going back. There's no changing. You can't, just like in the garden, you can't go back and say, oh, well, that didn't happen. Let's forget and forget. Because it did happen. Even if it was once. But if it's more than once, that's not an accident. I think even once is not an accident. But when you're talking 2 and 3 and 4 times that something like that happens, that is a serial adulterer who decides that they are going to disrespect the boundaries that are set up inside marriage to stay faithful for life. So God created boundaries, and he was pretty clear in Genesis that there was no pushing past his boundaries, that once he decided that there was a boundary, that he had a limit, that the consequence was that they had to leave the garden. And that's what happened. And a lot of times that's the consequence of, adultery or sin inside of a marriage is divorce. So what do boundaries look like in other kind of relationships? They would be, like I said earlier, limits that you place on yourself, things that you will and will not accept. You will not accept somebody who drives recklessly. You won't ride with that person. If you have a friend who curses or a family member who curses and you don't want to be around it, you can say, I don't want to be around you. I talked about in another video about boundaries, about how if somebody's smoking and you can say, I don't want to be around you when you're smoking. I will be around you when you are not smoking. That is a healthy boundary. And boundaries are taking responsibility for our own lives and letting other people take responsibility for their own lives. And boundaries are also not enabling people to not deal with their own responsibilities or their own burdens. When we enable somebody, I'm thinking of a situation like raising a child. When they're babies, obviously, we carry the entire burden for them. But as they get older and older, and especially when they start reaching almost adulthood, the responsibility should have switched from totally on our backs as the parents to totally on the child's back as an adult. And if we are enabling them to not carry their own load, whether it is, going to school, completing their assignments, taking care of, any pets or things around the house, if we continue to carry their burdens all the way into adulthood, then they will become adults who expect that other people carry their burdens. And I talk about in another video about narcissists, and I really think that one of the reasons why we have so many narcissists these days is because parents weren't willing to let their child deal with their own responsibility and the consequences for the choices they make. when we carry their burden and don't allow them to feel the discomfort of consequences, then they grow up to be adults who don't want to deal with their consequences. We always talk about that we should be nice to people, but Jesus wasn't nice. He was kind, but he told the truth in love, and he was always honest. And that's our example for good boundaries. And lastly, as Christians, we don't need to be sweet all the time. We are called to be salt and light of the world. I talk a lot about boundaries here, but I'd love to have your questions. What do you want to know about boundaries? What are the things that hold you back? What are the problems you have setting boundaries or keeping boundaries? Or where do you feel pushed or disrespected? And where are you dealing with resentment for having lack of boundaries? So I appreciate you watching. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss the next video. Thank you.